What's up guys? I'm here to show you my personal process for filming camps in Fallout 76. This is actually going to be a mini-series, so this is going to be part 1 since there can be a lot to cover in a single video, but be looking out for part 2 down the road. For this first part, I'm going to be focusing on the actual filming within the game. I'm on PC and I record using OBS Studio. I'm not going to go into detail regarding my personal OBS settings other than to say be mindful of only using your audio for Fallout 76. You don't want to mistakenly record on the channel that picks up the computer audio. I've made that mistake before, and then I had unwanted sounds in my videos like Discord messages, even Discord chat before, anything like that. But if you want help setting up your OBS settings, I'm including a link to the video that I personally use to set mine up. Now, let's go ahead and jump into these steps. So the first thing we're going to cover is my in-game audio settings. The best way to view a camp is to actually visit it in-game and experience it yourself for what it truly is, but viewers don't have that as an option, so I like to bring as much of that experience into the filming as possible. I turn my effects volume all the way up to 100%. This allows the viewer to hear the ambiance, the weather, camp items, and atmosphere as you navigate the camp. I personally turn off all the other audio options like footsteps, voices, radios, everything except for effects. I find that the other sounds can be distracting or repetitive, especially if you have an ally that says the same thing every other minute. The second part is prepping your camp for filming. First, I like to scan the perimeter of my camp using VATS, just to make sure that there's no nearby enemies, as they might interrupt your filming or your audio. If you do encounter any, be mindful of the weapon that you use. I've made the mistake of using plasma weapons and they leave behind a pile of green goo and you can't move them. I tend to use ballistic or explosive weapons to clear out enemies, and I also make sure to loot them so that you don't see their remains highlighted in the background. The next thing I do is hide my camp module when I don't want to include it into the build itself. This is a personal preference for me, but I feel like it breaks the immersion and the experience when you see a random camp module in the middle of your build and it's out of place. When I'm done filming, I'll put it back where I had it so that visitors spawn in the correct area. After that, if I have any allies or pets, I consider hiding them while I film. When my camp videos include a dweller, it usually takes me about twice as long to film. I've had multiple times where I was about to get the perfect shot, and then suddenly my pet or my ally teleported and it broke the immersion or continuity of the shot. So as a best practice, if they are not an important part of your camp story, then it's best to leave them stored so that they don't interrupt your filming. Next, I'll consider the time of day or night and the weather that I want to use in my video. If you film in the daylight, the viewer can see the details in your build, but the drawback is that you lose the effect of lighting. Filming at night or in darker conditions can create some amazing shots when your camp's lighting glows, but you lose the detail. Sometimes I'll film in both conditions. I usually take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour when I film my camps, depending on how large or extensive the build is. So a lot of times if I film during the day, my shots will gradually shift towards nighttime anyways, and this allows me to show off both the details and the lighting in a single video. But weather stations are also a great way to keep your lighting consistent without having to worry about the time of day or night. Now, the most important part of prepping your camp for filming is mapping out how you're going to navigate the camp while you film. Remember that while you know every square inch of your camp, the viewer doesn't, and they're just seeing it for the first time. You want your video to create a blueprint for them so that they have a full context of how your camp is built and where everything is. My process is to start with establishing shots, show them what your camp looks like from farther away, as if they were just discovering it themselves and are walking towards it. From there, I'll start getting closer shots of the exterior, and I may show parts of the exterior that work my way towards the entrance that I want to lead them down. As I work my way into the interior, I'll think about what path I want to take the viewer on. I try to follow the path that any in-game visitor would take if they were actually visiting my camp to make it feel natural. If my camp has multiple stories, I'll start downstairs work my way upstairs, and then go back downstairs before leaving the interior. When you treat your photo mode camera like a person who can't just teleport anywhere, it provides the best sense of direction for the viewer. So to summarize, my format for showcasing is to start with exterior, move towards interior, and then end with exterior again. Now, some bonuses for camp prepping. First would be to find actors, or at least an actor. Having movement and interaction within your videos makes a massive difference in the viewer's experience and their attention span. Be sure to have actors that you can voice chat with. It'll make the process much easier. Trying to handle messages to tell someone, okay, go ahead, start moving, it's going to draw out that process and make it much more difficult than it needs to be. If you don't have any actors, that's okay. There are ways that you can strategically place your character into poses or just standing around that bring a little bit of life to your shots. Find areas that make sense for your character to stand or pose, and whether it's you or actors, try to maintain continuity. You don't want your shots to feel like people are constantly teleporting from one room to the other. Another really helpful and honestly underrated tip is to think about your music before you film your camp. Music makes a really big difference in how the viewer experiences your camp. As a really quick example of this, here's what my current filming footage looks like with a more chill song in the background. It's giving you, as the viewer, a sense of relaxation or tranquility, and that's changing how you perceive the camp itself, as well as my voice. Now, watch as I transition to a different type of song. The mood of the camp shifts entirely. It feels more like a carnival or a fair, which brings more life and energy to the build. Even my voice sounds a little bit different. You're perceiving it differently, even though I haven't changed my inflections, I haven't changed my tone or anything. So, walk around your camp, listen to different songs, and see if the music that you want to use fits the experience that you want to give to the viewer. Understanding what kind of music you want to use before you film allows you to consider the way that you film your shots ahead of time, which makes the overall experience even more cohesive. Another bonus tip that makes a massive difference in your videos is to think about a backstory to your camp or your video. Stories are a really powerful tool that we can all use to keep the viewer's attention and create more context within a build. Your story doesn't have to be sealed tight. They don't even need to be that interesting. They can be pretty average. Sometimes a loose story of having your character navigate around the camp alongside the viewer is more than enough. I personally enjoy creating some sort of story and then providing more context or lore to it in my video description. Now we're going to take a look at the free cam settings. For the field of view, I like to stay within the 50 to 70% range for the most part. This helps me to keep my shots cinematic and avoid unwanted stretching, distortion, or fisheye effects. The lower you have your field of view, the nicer the shot looks, but the drawback is that you have less peripheral vision. So play around with it, see what makes the most sense for each shot that you take. Typically when I'm filming establishing shots outside, I'll use a higher FOV from further away. And when I get into the interior, I'll increase my field of view a bit so that the viewer can see the various merges or decorations that I have in a single shot. If you want to show off a certain merge or item, increasing your FOV is a great way to bring focus to it. Next, you have the camera speed. I recommend keeping this at the slowest setting possible, all the way to the left. This keeps your shots stable, and you can always speed them up in post. Occasionally, I might increase my speed a little bit, but Fallout lately has been having a really big issue where there's a lot of stuttering. So I usually find I have the best results if I just keep it down all the way, especially when you are moving vertically. And the last setting that I really touch in FreeCam is the depth of field. In general, I keep my depth of field off. The shots are more clear, and you can see everything around you better. For me, personally, part of a good camp is how it fits into the location, so I don't want to blur that out. I want to highlight the way that it fits into the location as a whole. However, there are times where you may want to highlight the build, so you can play around with that depth of field setting for that. This can work well for builds that are floating or on a cliffside in order to really emphasize the height of your location. It feels much further away if it looks blurry. Alright, so the next part of this, if you have a controller, I really recommend using it. The joystick movements are just going to be so much more smooth and easy to work with than your computer mouse. If you have to use your computer mouse, try to turn your DPI down as much as you can so that it feels as smooth as possible. But I really recommend using a controller if you want the best and smoothest shots. As far as controller movement goes, you've got two joysticks. Utilize both of them. It creates more dynamic movement and interesting shots. And lastly, use vertical movement. With your triggers on your controller or with your mouse and keyboard. Just do it conservatively. Vertical movement doesn't have any gradual acceleration. It's pretty instant. So I try not to use it too often so that the video footage isn't jarring and you're not being tugged around constantly. But you can also utilize vertical movement by putting your camera at a downward angle, moving backwards. You'll be gradually moving up and you can have the same effect without any of the tugging that the normal vertical movement gives you. Alright, so we're going to jump into the actual filming process now. The first step here is always start your shots early and end them late. I'm actually going to go as far as to say if the shot looks good, keep it going until it doesn't look good anymore. You may want to stop the shot early because you got the footage that you planned on getting, but you never know when the perfect shot may appear, or you may wish that you had more footage in post because you wanted the scene to be a little bit longer, and that's not something that you can change when it's all said and done. Transitions in post require more footage than you think. This helps you to avoid seeing unwanted movements or displays during your transition periods in post. There's a lot of times where I thought I was done with the shot and then I had a slower transition that I was editing, and all of a sudden you see the camera jerk around because I didn't film it for long enough before or after. The next thing to do is find objects of permanence when you are looking at transitions. Remember, the viewer has not seen your camp and they can't physically walk it. You need to guide them through it by maintaining a sense of direction and camp blueprint. So the first part of this was creating a path that they would take if they were actually walking around it themselves. The next part of this is wherever you end your last shot, start your next shot with something that was familiar from that shot beforehand. Finding items of permanence is a great way to maintain a sense of navigation. The user knows where the item was in the last shot, and therefore it's relevant when you jump into the next shot. The third thing I'll cover is camera heights. Perspective makes a really big difference in how the camp is viewed. If you look at it from eye level, it's going to be the way that a normal passerby would see it. If you take your shots from a lower perspective, low to the ground, it's going to make you look at it from an ant's perspective, and your camp, therefore, is going to feel more epic or large or grand. And shots that are filmed from a bird's eye view or just a higher angle in general are going to provide more of a sense of layout and context. When you're maneuvering in FreeCam, focus on slow and steady movement. Viewers need time to look at your camp and take in everything that you've done with it. And if you are moving too quickly, they're not going to have the opportunity to appreciate what you've done and all the work that you've put into it. Another part of this is avoid clipping into items whenever you can. It breaks the immersion and realism when you clip into the items, especially when they start to disappear. Clipping through doors for me is excusable, but if I do it personally, I'll go into post and I'll create a transition that avoids the door from disappearing, and I'll show you that more in the next video. So that's it for part 1, guys. I really appreciate you looking into this. This gives you an idea of how I go about my filming process, but stay in tune. I'm showing the raw footage unedited. It is at a higher speed because it was about 40 minutes of footage, and I didn't want to have to make you guys sit through a 40-minute video. But in the next part, I'm going to go through and actually edit this video footage, splice out the parts that I want to take, and make a showcase out of it. So I'll be showing you that as well. I just want to say thank you to all you guys. You've been so supportive and encouraging to me as I'm putting out different videos. And I want to give you guys some encouragement too, that a lot of my ideas weren't planned out far in advance. They happened during the process too. So don't feel like you have to have every single detail lined up before you start filming. It's a lot like camp building is too. Sometimes you just need a rough or a base idea, and then the ideas start flowing during your process. But if you guys ever want to ask questions or dig more into my thoughts, I'm always happy to share with you. Feel free to comment here on YouTube. Feel free to add me on Discord at cowinbaby902. I'm here to help the community out. You guys have been super helpful with me, and that's what this is all about. So I appreciate you guys' time and hope you have a good one.